But today, as the United States and Cuba attempt to normalize a political and economic relationship built on years of mistrust, the fate of some of the best ball players in the world could light the path for what happens next.
The nutsest baseball game I've ever seen between Industriales and their main rival, Matanzas. In the first inning alone, we saw 4 pitcher changes, and next thing you know, Industriales scored 4 runs, and now it's a tie game. I've never really seen anything like this. Why is it that Cuban fans have so much passion for baseball? When one of your favorite players, when they leave, how does that make you feel?
Lo que importa es que los peloteros cubanos destaquen en cualquier país. Mientras sea en Cuba, vivimos el regionalismo, pero cuando sea a nivel internacional, lo que nos importa es que los peloteros nacionales, los cubanos, sean los mejores allá.
Political change and a future of uncertainty hover over the island of Cuba. But one thing remains constant. Baseball here defines the national identity, and its roots run deep through this country's history.
Porque lo que no pueden perdonarnos los imperialistas es que estemos aquí y que hayamos hecho una revolución socialista en las propias narices de los Estados Unidos.
In 1959, as revolution swept across Cuba, the new socialist government expelled all influence of their capitalist neighbors. The United States retaliated with a total embargo of the island. And effectively undermining Castro's government, the Americans created the Cuban Adjustment Act, an unorthodox immigration policy that we know today as wet foot, dry foot, granting asylum to any Cuban citizen who manages to set foot on American soil. But for the Cuban baseball player who hopes to play in the majors, the journey to America is a long one, and their path to immigration is unlike any other citizen leaving the island.
And Puig unloads, and it goes upstairs.
In 2013, Yasiel Puig caused a sensation when he defected from Cuba and burst onto the major league stage, signing one of the highest paydays ever for a former Cuban player.
Major League Baseball can't do business with any Cuban ball player until they're no longer Cuban. They have to establish residency in a third country.
We sat down with Jesse Katz, a writer and journalist who spent months tracking the Dodger outfielder's journey from immigrant to all-star.
I think every Cuban player who makes the decision to leave the island is rolling the dice. So if you're a ball player of Yasiel Puig's caliber, you just can't afford to take any ride off the island. It has to be in the hands of a black market that can avoid the Coast Guard and also can make peace with the drug cartels that dominate that area. The irony and the danger in all of this is that the smuggler is not going to take you directly to the United States. If you're a Cuban ball player and you make it to the U.S., you will be treated as an amateur under baseball rules. So it's imperative for the Cuban ball player to get to a third country.
Foregoing their Cuban citizenship, the most common route for these players is through a neighboring island. I'm standing on the border of the Dominican Republic and Haiti. That is the Masacre River. This route is important because it's one of the many routes that the players from Cuba use to get into the Dominican Republic. The players that take this route must first make it across the sea and into Haiti. Then they're faced with a trek over the mountains before they get to Santo Domingo, a city where dozens of MLB academies have sprouted up to scout new talent.
That is Yasmani Tomas. He is 6'1", 230 pounds of raw Cuban power. Even though he's never played a day of Major League Baseball, he's already being touted as a potential $100 million man. Anything over $70 million would make him the highest paid Cuban baseball player ever.
Yasmani's first step off the island was onto a makeshift raft. Fortunately, he made it across the choppy Caribbean Sea to Haiti, where he made contact with the middlemen who would smuggle him here.
So why take the risk to leave your country where you grew up?
Bueno, ¿no? Cada persona tiene como meta, ¿no? Llegar a lo máximo en su carrera. Pienso que el béisbol de Grandes Ligas es el mejor del mundo. Y quiero darme la oportunidad, ¿no? De jugar con los mejores peloteros del mundo.
You get nervous when you think about the prospect that you could possibly be the highest paid Cuban baseball player in history.
Yo no pienso que el dinero sea lo más importante. En Cuba, ¿no? Hay un gran talento. Sí, pienso que hay esa posibilidad de que no tenga que pasar muchos riesgos los peloteros, ¿no? Y sería beneficio para el país de Cuba, para Estados Unidos, para muchas personas.
Like countless Cuban players before him, Yasmani has to permanently sever ties with his native country just for the opportunity to enter the major leagues as a free agent. It's a dance that no other international player has to do. But in December of 2014, a groundbreaking announcement put a light at the end of the tunnel.
Today, the United States of America is changing its relationship with the people of Cuba. We will end an outdated approach that for decades has failed to advance our interests, and instead, we will begin to normalize relations between our two countries.
But surprisingly, the 2014 announcement has had the opposite effect for major league prospects across the island. Since the mid-90s, the rate of Cuban defections to America has been a constant. In the last year alone, that number has exploded to more than 40,000 defections.
It's an unintended consequence of America's improving relationship with Cuba, a flood of migrants trying to reach the U.S. illegally. In just the last week, the Coast Guard stopped 150 people.
Ball players are now part of an unprecedented exodus. And even while these two countries attempt to build a bridge to cross the half-century of mistrust that has kept them apart, Cuban players and Cuban citizens have decided that the time to leave is now.
Nuestros niños ya a los 5 años van a nuestras áreas deportivas. Quiere decir que ya comienza.
The insane level of talent in Cuba is the product of lifelong investments in a system. We sat down with Pino Velez, the head of Cuba's Baseball Federation, to understand why this island has turned into a gold mine for Major League Baseball.
Que no era producto de brujería, que no era producto de santería, que es un trabajo creado durante muchos años y es por eso que se dice que un pelotero cubano sale debajo de una yagua que decimos nosotros igualmente, que es el producto de la palma. Y es que hay un trabajo desde la base.
Once they're identified early on, players are entered into a pyramid system based on their age and skill level. The best players at each level are filtered up so that the top players always compete against increasingly higher talent.
We're in Ciudad Deportiva. This is Sports City. These kids that we're watching play are the sub-18, 16 to 18-year-olds. This is the championship team assembled from all the best kids. This is the last stop in the pipeline.
These kids are basically good enough that any one of them could sign a minor league deal in the States like that.
Se habla del socialismo del siglo XXI, donde hay que cambiar muchas cosas. Nosotros no vamos a dejar de ser socialistas. Y tenemos que pensar que las autoridades de ambos países decidan qué va a suceder, tanto en la política, en todas las esferas de la sociedad, como en el deporte.
Socialism has a clear influence on the quality and quantity of top-level players developed in Cuba. But that same political history has created a culture of isolation, keeping many of this island's greatest talents from baseball's biggest stage. One of the best of them is the head of Cuba's greatest baseball family. With over 2,000 hits and a lifetime batting average of .322, Lourdes Gurriel is a legend of the Cuban game, and his legacy lives on with his three sons, Yuneski, and Lourdes Jr. What will it mean to you if you do get to see one or two or three of your sons get to play in the major leagues?
Que vio mis números, buenos números, pero yo no puedo decir no, fui un gran pelotero, ¿no? Porque no me probé nunca en Grandes Ligas. Si me hubiera probado en Grandes Ligas, le decía, pero si fui un gran pelotero, va a ser una gran satisfacción, en el caso mío, de que mis hijos, y decir, yo jugué en Grandes Ligas. ¿Me entiendes?
While they haven't played in the United States, the Gurriel brothers are major league talent, no question. The youngest, 23-year-old Lourdes Jr. is one of Major League Baseball's most coveted prospects. While at 31 years old, Yuleski Gurriel is still considered the most complete player in Cuba. Have either of you ever been approached by any Major League teams?
Sí, hemos tenido muchos acercamientos. Prácticamente cada vez que salimos del país tenemos muchas ofertas, muchas personas que se nos acercan para que traten de aceptar.
Why did you guys stay home? Why didn't you leave?
Siempre estar unidos, la familia. Nosotros, eso es lo que una de las cosas que nos ha ayudado mucho. Nunca nos hemos separado y gracias al apoyo de nuestros padres también estamos aquí hoy.
The Gurriel family is the crowning achievement of the Cuban system, and recognizing the need to adapt and keep their best from defecting to America, Cuba made an unprecedented concession in 2013. For the first time, a handful of players, including Yuleski Gurriel, were permitted to play in select foreign countries, like Japan, returning a percentage of his earnings back to the Cuban government. Lourdes Jr. was one of a few players to receive pay bumps at home. An average player in Cuba makes $17 a month. Lourdes Jr. can now make up to $100, generous by Cuban standards, but still far less than he could earn in the majors.
Lo sueño yo todos los días. Yo lo sueño. Y a veces me despierto y ya están. Verme en los Yankees, Nueva York, en los Mets, con el Boston. Todos esos equipos grandes. Cualquiera me sirve.
But in spite of their father's dream, the Gurriel brothers choose Cuba. They choose their family.
I think the Cuban ball players view their journey to the U.S. kind of requiring a code of silence. You just don't talk about how you got here. I think part of it is you're dealing with people in the underworld. They usually have family back in Cuba, and they don't want there to be any negative consequences for the family members they've left behind. And it's almost all, for all of them, kind of a traumatic experience. It's a scary thing.
We're in a barrio in Havana called Buena Vista, and we are going to meet the wife of a baseball player who recently defected and is living in the Dominican Republic. Hola.
Hola.
Hola, Quireña. Me llamo Selema. Mucho gusto. Es Mario, ¿no?
Este es Mario. Mi esposo Mario Luis.
He's good looking, handsome.
No, yo soy más hermosa que él. Aquí es donde duermo. Aquí el niño, la habitación.
Carreño Neira's husband was a pitcher in their small hometown of Ciego. But after he defected with little warning, she and her family moved to Havana, looking for better paying jobs in the bigger city.
He left, but he's not in a position to send you money.
Sí, él se fue y no tiene la posibilidad todavía, no tiene la posición para ayudarme todavía.
How often do you get to talk to Mario?
No, muy poco. Hasta por correo se está haciendo difícil. Tengo muy poca oportunidad de hablar con él. Cuando él me dice que no tiene dinero allá, y cuando yo tengo la oportunidad le pongo dinero al teléfono y entonces yo lo llamo y converso con él. Para mí es súper difícil, pero bueno, tengo que seguir apoyándolo. Aunque nunca estuve de acuerdo con la decisión, pero él tomó esa decisión y yo estoy apoyándolo.
That's love.
Bueno, pienso yo que sea amor.
At home, the only stories we hear about are the guys who show up and make it and get the millions of dollars and get reunited with their families. On the other side of that are situations like this one, and the consequences for not making it, as you can see, are pretty dire.
$17 a month isn't much money to live on, even in Cuba. But the average player making this salary on the island still has MLB talent, and with it, a shot at a life-changing deal. We went back to the Dominican to find Carreño's husband, Mario. But with a new exodus of talent streaming out of Cuba, American scouts are becoming increasingly selective. And now they've left dozens of players like Mario Neira stuck. He severed ties with Cuba, but can't move forward.
How long have you been here in the Dominican Republic?
6 meses. Bueno, el tiempo que estaré, no sé. Hasta que firme, porque ese es mi propósito.
How did you come to make the decision to leave?
Para poder ayudar a mi familia principalmente, pasando trabajo allá, no importa cómo haya sido, ni los problemas que pudo haber causado, pero siempre y cuando siempre se puede resolver.
How did you deal with your wife? You know, what was that conversation like when you made this decision?
Conversación con ella de que me iba, no tuve, porque no quería correr ningún riesgo. Al que ella no sé, porque si le contaba a ella no iba a querer que yo me fuera. Uno sabe lo riesgoso que es eso, de la forma en que yo vine, es riesgoso, pero ya vi que se me dio la oportunidad, yo decidí que era el momento, ayudarlo, ese es el sueño de todo el mundo, jugar pelota a Grandes Ligas y así ayudar a la familia.
Whatever the risk, Mario's one path off the island is baseball. He's devoted his entire life to the game, but now time is a luxury he can't afford. 150 players have fled Cuba since the announcement because the possibility of normal relations with America, it's made the future anything but clear. And a year's worth of headlines has barely changed the course of a 50-year standoff. Waiting for diplomacy to run its course is not an option. Like any athlete, the biggest risk is time. It's letting the game pass them by.
Would you say that your success is going to affect whether or not you'll be able to see your family again?
Que para eso voy a luchar, que para eso estoy aquí.
I would say that there's a good amount of complicity to go around. Major League Baseball has a role in it. The U.S. government has a role in it. All of us as baseball fans are complicit in it. They are performers and part of a sports industrial complex that puts them on a pedestal for all of our enjoyment. But think about the perspective of a Cuban baseball player. You can really sense the bind that they're caught in.
And he does it again. Yasmani Tomas, that's number 7. And it's 2-1 Diamondbacks.
Not long after his raft landed in Haiti, Yasmani Tomas signed a paper that changed his life. Of the several MLB teams scouting him, the Arizona Diamondbacks signed Yasmani to one of the largest contracts ever for a Cuban player. $68.5 million over 6 years. And this record-breaking deal was no surprise in Cuba, where they remain proud that their players are recognized, but haunted by what it means for their national sport.
Does it surprise you that so many players are willing to risk their lives to go and play in the States?
Innato en el ser humano, buscar su mejoría. Cualquier pelotero cubano que llegue allí y medianamente triunfa, le ofertan millones. Aquí no se le puede ofertar millones. Y eso ha hecho que el nivel, la calidad del béisbol cubano baje considerablemente.
The best of the Cuban system continue to defect. It's the same economic reality that's driven countless Cuban citizens off the island for decades. And even as talent has left, quality and pride in this country's national pastime have never wavered. But there were 2 recent defections that few, if any, Cubans were prepared for.
Yulieski and Lourdes Gurriel Jr., 2 of the best Cuban baseball players, have reportedly defected after the Caribbean series down in the Dominican Republic.
Soon after representing their country in the Dominican, Yulieski and Lourdes Gurriel Jr. disappeared from their team hotel and went into hiding.
Aquí se van muchos atletas. Lo correcto, lo normal, lo humano, es que existan las relaciones normales. Esa es mi patria, esa es mi bandera. Yo quiero ver un pelotero cubano jugando en la Yankee Stadium y después verlo aquí en el parque. Darle la mano, saludarlo.
Happen to be driving by here, and here on this little field in the middle of the community, meet an 81-year-old out here with parents coaching and developing kids.
The story that these kids inherit has no ending. A year ago, Cuba and the United States were enemies. Tomorrow, politics will be different than they are today. But as long as they stick in the game, the futures of the best ball players in the world won't belong to them. They'll be stuck between bigger forces.